Live right around Australia for our coverage of the Formula One Rolex Australian Grand Prix, and these guys are always a big part of the support race entertainment. V8 Supercar action about to get underway. Before we take you to the commentators, let's check in with Ian Shuttleworth. Ian?
Thank you, Rusty. Well, I'm down with the Brad Jones racing team, and they've had a good time of things at Albert Park so far this event. For this rain, Brad, it's going to make things a little interesting.
Well, it does. It throws in a lot of variables, and we've not run these cars in the wet before, so we're not 100% sure how they'll go. I'd like to think our blokes are still going to be up to the task, but it's damp. It could dry. It could stay wet. You know, so many different things are going to change this up. I think it'll be great for the people watching. I'm not so sure it's going to be great for my heart.
The element of risk is the big one, isn't it?
It is. You know, you're going to take risks, and really our two blokes are in the prime position, and the two or three behind them have everything to gain. So they'll probably be willing to take a few more risks than us. But you know, we just need to keep our head, make sure we make the right calls with tyres. That's going to be the big thing. Whether you stay out and try and do the whole race on one set of tyres, or whether you come in, get on the slicks, you'll definitely be faster, but you'll have trouble passing. So, you know, my brains trust have been kicking this around for the last half an hour. I guess we'll know in about another half an hour if I get it right.
Good luck. I hope your boys stay away from the walls.
Me too. Thank you.
Ian Shuttleworth there with Brad Jones. Pretty happy at the moment with the performance of his guys, both Fabian Coulthard and Jason Bright at the front of the field here. We'll take you to the commentators, and I guess the nerves, guys, are simply because this is a great new era for the sport, but they don't want these beautiful new cars of the future getting damaged. Richard Crail and Jack Perkins, take it away.
Thanks, Rusty. Hey, while we've got you, mate, you've been around the sport for a long time, and how good is it to see Brad Jones racing back at the front of the V8 field?
It's fantastic, and you've got to remember too here, guys, they've had some success at Albert Park. Remember going back to the days when they ran the BOC Falcons, they went 180, as well as some dramas here for Scott McLaughlin, but they went 180 with their tyre strategy one year. John Bowe and Brad Jones, they had some success, and of course there was that great race here one year with the late Jason Richards. We shouldn't forget that one either.
Absolutely, could not agree more. Thanks, Rusty. Jack Perkins alongside me for this a 14-lap race, 2 laps longer than what we've been seeing so far this weekend. We'll come back to Scott McLaughlin's dramas on the grid before we confirm it for you. Fabian Coulthard on pole thanks to his 2 race victories so far. His teammate Jason Bright alongside. Jack, Craig Lowndes, as we run through the grid, starts 3rd, should be 2nd, but dramas in race 2 yesterday.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Craig Lowndes crossed the finish line in 2nd, but a little pit lane altercation with Bridie after the pit stop meant that the stewards reversed those positions around. Probably fair enough. So it's an all Brad Jones racing front row, which is great to see. Lowndes and Will Davison 3rd and 4th, and James Moffat in that brand new Nissan Altima in 5th. What a fantastic result for that fresh new Nissan team.
And you saw just before the bottom half of the top 10, Shane van Gisbergen going from 9th in the Techno Autosports. Holden had to work his way forward after a failure in race 1, went to the back of the grid. The big question is, as Rusty touched on, the weather. From what you could see when teams were leaving pit lane in front of our commentary position, everyone out on the Dunlop wet tyre. But this could be a race where pit stop strategy plays a massive role as we go on and as the track dries, if in course it does dry.
That's exactly right. So with Formula One, they have 2 types of wet weather tyres. In V8 Supercar, we've only got one version. It's a very much a harder wet tyre. It's more like an intermediate, so it won't be that bad in dry running. It can normally put up with a bit of dry running. So a little bit more rain coming back down now, which means, I mean, definitely they're on wets. It's a matter of whether it's going to be a dry enough racetrack towards the end of the race where they'll change and put slicks on, or change and leave the wet tyres on. But the interesting one here, as we spoke about, 28 brand new cars this year, and this is the first time the brand new cars have ran in the wet. And I know that teams have been busting the time to get here to be at the first race 2 weeks ago, and there's been an enormous amount of man hours going. And I can tell you right now, I'd be watching the windscreen wipers on a few cars, because the last thing that goes into your mind when you're building a brand new race car is whether the windscreen wiper is going to work. And I can tell you, as a driver, the first thing I ask for is a windscreen wiper and a windscreen demister.
That's an interesting point, and as part of the Car of the Future regulations, they've gone to the polycarbonate front screen, which is incredibly strong, and it means they've been able to remove the Larry bar across the front of the roll cage, but it also means there's no heating elements in the screen anymore, correct?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they've come up with varying ways. The polycarbonate shields are fantastic. They've got different chemicals and compounds that they can put on the inside and the outside to disperse the water and hopefully keep the fog away. But one old wives' tale is a bit of dishwashing fluid on the inside. inside, that will keep the fog away. But I tell you what, as a race car driver in the wet, when you can't see where you're going, it's a frightening experience, especially at a street circuit like this. You could be doing 250 kilometres an hour and you can't even see the car in front.
Contrasting fortunes for the new brands this weekend. Nissan has been superb. James Moffat, in particular, over the moon with P5 yesterday. And I spoke to him last night and he said, I think there's more to come. The big question is, what are those cars going to be like in the wet weather? Because this is a brave new world for them.
And we can see Scott McLaughlin in pit lane. He had a drama, as we spoke about. We saw when the cars left for the warm-up lap, his car didn't go. I suggest that he'd maybe got a flat battery or something, needed a push start to get going. You need to come back into pit lane and prove that you can start under your own power, and he'll be in there doing that now. As we see, looks like Todd Kelly's missed his grid spot, and obviously the vacant spot there is the Fujitsu car of Scott McLaughlin. We're awaiting a green flag now for the start of the race.
So, race 3, the MSS Security V8s at Albert Park, and it's a wet one. And away they go, scrabbling to put 650 horsepower to the ground, and Jason Bright goes nowhere from the front row. It's all Fabian Coulthard, and Bright is going to be buried at the bottom half of the top 10. He's nowhere. Coulthard sweeps around in front, Lowndes second, Davison third, Van Gisbergen ninth, up to fourth place in front of David Reynolds. And everyone through cleanly so far, turns 1 and 2.
See, Fabian Coulthard's in the best seat here. He's got a nice clear track in front of him. The spray that disperses off the rear of these cars makes it so hard to see in traffic. And this is where the carnage always happens at Albert Park. Turn 3, lap 1. Let's see if they can get through safely on this first round.
Couple running wide, but everyone on the black stuff so far. Van Gisbergen was really harassing Will Davison through there, but he hasn't been able to get by. And in fact, under pressure from Davey Reynolds too. Before we went on air, you said there's a couple of names to watch in this race in the rain. One of them is Shane Van Gisbergen, so good in the wet.
Yeah, absolutely. Shane definitely has a lot of wet weather talent. The other two guys are Will Davison and Rick Kelly. Every time there's a wet weather practice session, race, qualifying session, those three names jump to the top of the timesheets. So I'm watching those guys with interest. As we see Tim Slade in the brand new Erebus AMG. Looks like he's come unstuck through turn 5. That's quite a quick corner. And I reckon he's touched the tyres. Looks like he's got going okay.
Of course, the other wet weather expert in the field is the guy running P2, Craig Lowndes, in car 888, and closing that gap down to Fabian Coulthard. So Holden's dominating the running at the moment. First, second, third with Van Gisbergen, then Davison and Reynolds fall. So David Reynolds going nicely in the Bottle Racing Ford, up in the top 5. Then Jason Bright, second on the grid, back to 6. He's in front of Jonathan Webb in the second Techno car, then James Moffat. Now, we've been speaking all season as Lowndes goes down the inside of Coulthard.
And this is hard for Fabian Coulthard. He's the pioneer out there when you're leading the race, so he's probably got on the brakes quite early, quite conservatively to make sure it get around the corner. Craig Lowndes can use him as a yardstick, and look at this 2x2 on the first lap. And Shane Van Gisbergen from 9th on the grid, sideways through this last bit of the track. This is going to be a great race.
And that's what we know and love. And trading paint there, Lowndes understeers off the racetrack. They bang mirrors going into the final corners, and Lowndes skates his way back onto the circuit. So drama's there. That locks Van Gisbergen onto the back of the Lockwood Racing Holden. So Fabian Coulthard leads lap 1, but 9th to 2nd in the opening lap of the race, and it could be first. Van Gisbergen goes round before they even get to turn 1. So the VIP car leads the race. Coulthard back to 2nd, and Reynolds is up to 3rd.
It's always easier in that instance where Shane Van Gisbergen was following. He was able to use Fabian as a yardstick. Fabian pioneering into turn 1 for the first time at speed. He probably broke a little early, which enabled Shane to get past. We look at Garth Tander and Jamie Winkup. They're fighting it out for a few positions further back. Let's look at the replay here at the start, because Shane Van Gisbergen must have got an absolute blind, as we can see him in the yellow number 97 car. He got a reasonable start, a little bit adjusting back in the pack, but Jason Bright, big loser there. Yeah, it went backwards. They all did a pretty good job getting through, and by the looks of it, everyone with their windscreen wipers working. And you could see Van Gisbergen just gripped up on the outside and made ground. A bit of hip and shoulder there. But impressive opening lap from Van Gisbergen. Now, this is Tim Slade. So exit of turn 5 and 6, just backs the car into the tyre bundle. And this was Lowndes and Fabian Coulthard. So watch for the contact. Coulthard just loses the driver's side mirror there, but Lowndes just a little bit too hot into the corner, understeered wide, and that allowed Van Gisbergen to close right in as well. And Van Gisbergen runs off and wide at turn 3. The race leader drops it all on his own. Just keeps it out of the barriers, and Coulthard back in front. this is what I was telling you about. When you're the leader of the race, every time you get to another corner in these wet, damp conditions, the grip level changes. It's a bit like driving on speedway. You're constantly searching for the grip, and Shane van Gisbergen has thrown it all the way down there at turn 3, and Fabian Coulthard has picked up the lead. David Reynolds, a big mover. He's up into second place in that bottle-o machine. Good job, Davey.
I thought Reynolds was just going to drive away. Here's James Courtney down the inside of the Norton 360 Racing Nissan Ultimate. James Moffat. 2 of the 4 cars from Kelly Racing. Nissan Motorsport now running the Norton branding. The other 2, there they are, in the Jack Daniels branding. And the Ultimas have been going pretty well. Just their second ever V8 Supercar event. And Reynolds off now from second place. So this is a case of who doesn't want to lead the motor race. Coulthard back in front.
And this is a perfect demonstration of how hard it is out there in these conditions. Brad Jones spoke about it in the interview. He knew this was going to be a great race for the fans, but the team owners, the heart rate's at about 190, and they are stressing out because this is so hard, and you don't want to damage these brand new cars because there's a lot of work. And our race leader, Fabian Coulthard, off. So Craig Lowndes, who dropped back to 4th, has now found himself back in the lead of the motor race because they're all running off the road searching for the most amount of grip they can get.
And it shows how hard they're pushing too, Jack, and Van Gisbergen's going to go up the inside here and get himself back to second. So the lap chart at the end of this one's going to look pretty remarkable with some yo-yoing up and down the table. So Lowndes now back in front. The 97 car in second. Remember, built by 888 Racing for Techno Autosports. And then back to Brad Jones Racing's Fabian Coulthard entry. This is Jonathan Webb. He's made some ground, 7th at the moment, in front of Jason Bright. Here's your leader.
So Fabian's just got it in too hot to turn 1. Maybe had a locked front tyre, so you need to clear the brake pedal, get the momentum with the wheel going again, tap back on the brake pedal, and he couldn't pull it up in time. Missed the apex through 1, but Shane van Gisbergen, he's been fastest to the first sector by a clear 0.7 of a second than Craig Lowndes. He's definitely got pace in that VIP pet foods machine.
Back a little bit, there's Alex Davison in the Geldron Racing Ford, the blue Ford, just in front of Todd Kelly. The Jack Daniels Ultimate, then Mark Winterbottom, who's been mired in the pack a little bit this weekend, Frosty. It's been an uncharacteristic weekend for Mark, and just added a new one to the Winterbottom family, as it were. So, well, Lowndes sideways, that's what you see from Van Gisbergen normally, and he's going to have to move across to cover his racing line from Shane van Gisbergen. I don't think it'll make any difference down the inside. So, big move down the inside by Van Gisbergen. Lowndes back to second. His team boss, Roland Dane, is in pit lane with Schutz now. Schutsy?
Yeah, thank you, boys. Roland, as you just said to me off air a short time ago, it's all happening.
Yeah, well, I think the 2 loosest blokes in the formula are fighting it out at the front at the moment. It's pretty exciting.
What do you make of it so far this weekend for you guys? You've had a tough time of things?
Yeah, not quite as good as we would have liked, and not that bad, but yeah, we would have liked to have been a little bit further up.
What about Craig out there now? He's the man you want in the dogfight like this.
Yeah, Craig's certainly in the thick of it now, but hopefully it's a good race.
We'll let you get back to watching it.
Thanks, Schutz. The word from Red Bull Racing as Van Gisbergen retakes the lead. So he, 4 laps in, he's led twice, and he's been 4th and 3rd and 2nd, and now he's back in front, and he leads Craig Lowndes, lap 4 of 12. Just confirmation, it is a 12-lap race due to the conditions and the time constraints, with Formula 1 qualifying not too far away, as we watch Craig Lowndes with a very, very big sideways moment just out on the AstroTurf there. Very slippery over that curb as well. This is a 12-lap race, or 1 lap past 3:54 local time.
A bit of follow the leader there, Alex Davison in the 4th FPR entry. Just a little hot into that corner, and it looked like Mark Winterbottom followed him off. Not so much in sympathy, but when you're following the cars in front, you really trust that you're all working on the same grip level, and you're braking off the brake lights in front of you, and they both ran off the road.
And breathe. This has been a wild start, hasn't it, to race through the V8s. It's been good all weekend, though, Jack, and the car of the future, car of today, the new V8 Supercar, is really impressed around here. The racing has been high quality all weekend long, and this might not be a points round for the series, but they're still playing for keeps.
It's really refreshing for the category. Brand new cars. For the first time in a long time, there's been a whole field of brand new cars, and for over 20 years it's been the Holden and Ford battle. This year we welcome Nissan and Mercedes-Benz, 2 brand new manufacturers, to make it a 4-way dogfight. And look at this, look at Lowndes just backing it in. The fans will be loving this race. This is awesome stuff. Lots of passing, and we don't know who the winner's going to be. This is awesome.
He's got phenomenal car control, Craig Lowndes. We know that. We've seen what he's done over the years. The number of heroic drives that he's produced, and Can he make another one? Started the season so well in Adelaide, leads the points championship, which continues down in Tasmania in a couple of weeks' time. So we go back to our early race leader, Fabian Coulthard, back in third. Now, big question is now, how do you work the pit stop strategy? Because they still have to make a compulsory pit stop in this race. Usually it be with the Dunlop soft tyre to change tyres, but they still have to make a stop whether they're on wets or dries. When do you do it? Now that it's a wet race rather than the dry ones we've seen so far.
Yeah, well, we can see that the rain's persisting, albeit a little bit of drizzle, a little bit of rain. It's not actually dry in the circuit. There's no clear dry line, so I'd be very surprised if anyone was keen to jump onto the slick tyre. And part of the new Car of the Future rules is that the cars are all running an 18-inch wheel. So this is the first time competitors have ran on the 18-inch Dunlop wet weather tyre, as we see Todd Kelly and the Jack Daniels Nissan run off. A few years ago, we saw a Paul Dumbrell come onto the track in similar circumstances and create a big crash there in the wet weather, and lucky to avoid any contact with anyone else. But yeah, so they'll be learning a lot about this new 18-inch Dunlop wet weather tyre. Be learning a little bit about the tyre pressure and things. And look at this, 3 Nissans into one may not work out well. And Michael Caruso, they're your 2 new team bosses. Just be careful about putting a bit of yellow paint on that black thing. And as I say, he rubs his driver's mirror off on the boss's car.
Well, I think knowing Rick and Todd Kelly, that they'd probably like to be a little bit more aggressive and actually race for position rather than have a driver that just drops back, but not too much more damage. Thank you very much, Robbo. Big move down the inside. Lucas Dumbrell Motorsport car, Scotty Pye, the young rookie who was pretty impressive on the streets of Adelaide and jumping out of the Dunlop Series. And there's Jamie Whincup, the #1 Red Bull racing car, working his way through the field. A non-finish yesterday meant he's started this one right from the very back.
One thing I noticed about the back end of the first sector of the circuit there, where a lot of the trees are, there's some drier patches of track. So one thing the drivers will be able to pass on to the teams is, for the second set of wet weather tyres, if that's what they do in the pit stop, let's change the tyre pressure. The track's drying in some places. We could probably bump the tyre pressure down a little bit so it hangs on a bit longer in those intermediate conditions.
So it's Van Gisbergen, Lowndes. Coulthard is 5.6 seconds behind the leaders, but back in third place. David Reynolds 4th, Will Davison 5th, then Jonathan Webb 6th, Jason Bright 7th, and then we go back to James Courtney in 8th, James Moffat 9th, and the first of the Nissans, and Russell Ingall in 10th place.
Now, Russell's a bit of a wet weather guru as well. We talk about Craig Lowndes being good in the wet, and the other guys, Russell Ingall always pretty good in the wet. Good move from him. He's up to 10th in the top 10 in that new super cheap VF Commodore. Look at a replay here. One of the biggest things about passing on the wet is you need to move off the drier line onto the wet stuff. So it's a good move from a young driver.
And that's a shot of Todd Kelly just running wide there at turn 1. The Nissans continue their battle. This is where Michael Caruso lost his mirror. Just runs into his teammate there, and Scott Pye in the Ecol car with some dramas. Coulthard and Reynolds side by side, dicing for position up at turn 3. And behind them is Will Davison. We have got a cracking V8 Supercar race on here at Albert Park, and it's only halfway through. Shane Van Gisbergen, your race leader, Craig Lowndes 2nd, Fabian Coulthard 3rd, as we count down to Formula 1 qualifying. Now coverage of the Rolex Australian Grand Prix here on 10. The last 3 times the V8 Supercars have raced here at the Formula 1 Rolex Australian Grand Prix, Kiwi driver Shane Van Gisbergen has finished on the podium. Hasn't been able to crack it for that elusive overall victory. Could this be the weekend? At the moment, he's leading race 3 of the V8 Supercars by just over 4 seconds in front of Craig Lowndes, as the 2 Jack Daniels Racing Nissan Motorsport teammates, the brothers as well, Rick and Todd Kelly, dice for track position. In fact, they're dicing for 10th and 11th place. Richard Craill and Jack Perkins with you in what's been a pretty wet and wild V8 race so far, Jack. This has been willing stuff, and the Nissan teammates aren't holding back either.
And not just teammates, they're brothers, Todd and Rick. I mean, it's one of those situations where you don't know whether they're having a good laugh behind the helmet or whether they're going, Todd, you're my brother, what are you doing? We're about to trade paint. But great racing for the spectators. Good to see these new Nissans, not just in the field, but running very competitively. Looking at the timesheets, every lap so far through the race, Shane Van Gisbergen's been getting quicker and quicker. That suggests to me that the track is definitely drying a little bit, but we're still a good 14, 15 seconds away from our dry tyre pace, so I'd be very surprised if anyone came in the pits and put anything other than another set of wets on.
For V8 Supercar fans that had followed the progress and the introduction of the new brands into the sport, it's been well well publicised that the Nissan team and indeed the Erebus AMG team are still down on horsepower, but these wet weather conditions will certainly help them. It's an equaliser, the rain.
Yeah, absolutely. Although you're still this is a track with a lot of full throttle percentage time, a lot of straightaways, so around about 65% of the lap you're on full throttle, but yeah, definitely a bit more of an equaliser. As we said before, that first sector of the track is becoming quite dry. You'd be a very game man to do anything other than throw wets on it, let me tell you, because all those white lines on the track there, not forgetting that this is a street circuit, so for 360 days of the year, people are driving around here at 40k an hour in a public road situation, so there's not a lot of grip out of here. So we look now, Fabian Coulthard, another mistake down at turn 3, just ran wide, and that's allowed Jonathan Webb to move into third. Jonathan Webb, the teammate of the race leader, Shane van Gisbergen. So the Techno Autosports boys are running first and third.
Fabian Coulthard, the winner of the first 2 races this weekend, in brilliant form yesterday in the drive. But the Brad Jones cars haven't been quite as switched on in these wet conditions. Mark Winterbottom working his way backwards, only P16 at the moment, and struggling. His Win Cup reigning champion, he's only 14th, working his way through. And speaking of the Pepsi Max crew for performance racing cars, while we were at break, we saw that guy there, front of screen, Will Davison, just outbrake himself at turn 13 and run wide, as Tony D'Alberto does in the back of that shot. So he managed to avoid any contact, but cost himself a potential podium finish.
Yeah, he did. Like I said, when you move off the traditional racing line in the wet, you typically find a wetter part of the road to make the move. Will locked the rears and ran wide. He did drop back to 9th position, but just past James Moffat for 8th. And I'd expect to see some pit stops pretty soon here, Richard. We've only got a handful of laps remaining in the race. Those are first set of tyres on the car now would be starting to get quite warm, quite greasy. And this is where the teams really need to get their act together, because any stuff up with a pit stop, a slow wheel change or anything can really have an impact on the result of the race.
12 months ago, Shane van Gisbergen won the third of 4 races here at Albert Park. This is race 3. He's leading by 6.1 seconds over Craig Lowndes. Webb up to third. So as you said, those Techno Autosport cars, which are 888 Racing built and engineered cars, are going very, very nicely in these conditions. Fabian Coulthard in 4th place. Reynolds, the first of the Fords. He's 5th in car 55, the Bottle Racing car from Ford Performance Racing. Jason Bright, 6th, started on the front row, slow start, drop back, and recovering now. Then back to James Courtney. Courtney up inside the top 10, ran out of tyres yesterday, he was saying, and the thing was sliding around the racetrack. His teammate, Garth Tander, had an even worse day, and in fact has only completed the 1 lap in this race and is currently shown as being in pit lane for the Holden Racing team. Has not been a good weekend for HRT.
No, unfortunately, the HRT boys will be disappointed with that. Had a mechanical failure on Garth's car yesterday, and they'll bounce back tomorrow without a doubt. But look at this, the 4 Nissans run in line astern with the 2 Norton ones in the middle of the 2 Jack Daniels. And look at those clouds. There's a bit more weather coming around yet, Richard. This race is not over and done with.
We checked the radar before the start of this race while we were preparing, and there's a big front coming over the bay, isn't there? So we reckon there's rain somewhere near the end of this, and every driver sliding their way out of that fast 11-12 complex at the back of Albert Park. Love going and watching the cars there from the fence, Jack, because you get to see how they work. As we see Michael Caruso on a bit of a charge, James Moffat dropping back.
It's interesting, actually, Moffat and Rick Kelly have been dropping back a little bit, whereas Todd and Caruso in the same team cars are moving forward. So potentially those guys started with a high tyre pressure, anticipating a little bit more rain on the circuit. So I wouldn't be too surprised if we see a couple of cars fire into pit lane for a fresh set of wet tyres.
You've raced these cars full time. You're a regular enduro driver, and you'll be back with Fujitsu Racing in September, October this year. What's the difference in driving style when you go from a dry track to a wet one? How do you adapt as a driver to the different conditions?
It's not too dissimilar in a way. You still drive into the grip level of the tyre. One of the biggest things, obviously, is there's a lot of water between the tyre and the road. So you really need to sneak your braking markers back. You need to feel the grip, and it takes a few laps to get a bit of an idea of how much grip's available. Every track is different surfaces and different elements that really make a big difference to the way the car handles in the wet. You've also got onboard sway bar adjusters, so you can soften the suspension off the anti-roll bars and gain a little bit more mechanical grip that way.
And this is the first real wet weather test for the brand new V8s as well. So far, so good. As we watch Mark Winterbottom continuing to dice with Jamie Whincup. It's a bit like the end of the V8 Supercar Championship last season. These were the 2 dominant teams of 2012, FPR and 888. And the branding different on both the cars. They're still fast, but this new era in V8 has just brought a couple of different names towards the front. Van Gisbergen continues to lead this race by a mammoth 8.9 seconds now over Craig Lowndes. So Van Gisbergen pulling away, looking for his second ever race win here on the streets of Albert Park.
Both the Techno cars are in a league of their own, to be honest. We look at the timesheets, they're both lapped in the 2:12 bracket, and the next fastest competitor on the track's done a 2:13.9. So they've nearly got 2 seconds over a lap faster than the rest of the field. The Techno boys have definitely got the wet weather setup sorted out on this brand new car of the future. See now Mark Winterbottom in the middle of Scott Pye and Jamie Winkup there. Jamie Winkup in the same car as Scott Pye, built in the same 888 factory. Scott doing a great job. First year rookie in the category. In front of Jamie Winkup, a commendable effort.
He's a great young guy, and he's been sort of talent spotted by Roland Dane, the boss of the Red Bull team and 888 Race Engineering for a couple of years, and raced British Formula 3. It's pretty good, had a couple of wins over there, but decided to come back. V8 Development Series last year, which, as we've seen the last couple of seasons, has been a brilliant training ground for the next generation of V8 Supercar stars. And we've been speaking a lot this weekend about the young Kiwi, Scott McLaughlin, who has been so exceptional. This race hasn't gone to plan, and we saw him in pit lane at the start, but he's the reigning champion. And you're pointing out they're all starting to look for the wet line now on the racetrack. These tyres starting to overheat, running on the dry surface, the wet with the tyres, starting to move across. Having said that, it has just started to rain a little bit more here at Albert Park, and that might just be the breath of fresh air they need. 2 to go. Van Gisbergen by 10 seconds even at the front of the field as we watch a great dice between the Nissans, and that's the fight for 10th, 11th, 12th and 13th place with Winterbottom behind.
One important thing this weekend, obviously a non-championship round for the competitors here at the Grand Prix. It's an overall podium from the 4 races put together, and the current point system will see Fabian Coulthard leading heading into that final race if the positions remain as is, and then Jason Bright second with Craig Lowndes third, only separated by 1 point. So the battle for outright contention this weekend is definitely going to be a good one to watch tomorrow.
As Winterbottom squeezes down the inside of James Moffat, who shuts the door firmly in the Norton 360 Racing Nissan. They've got Beyond Blue on the roof of their cars, a great charity organisation, Nissan Motorsport, and the Norton side of that garage supporting them this weekend. A really worthy cause. Great to see them raising awareness for a fantastic charity. Right in the thick of the action. They're certainly getting their fair share of TV time. They've got to be happy, Jack, with the way these cars have gone this weekend. We look back further down the order, the Erebus AMG cars, they've been struggling this weekend. They've had reliability dramas. We spoke earlier about Tim Slade having an engine issue, we believe, and forced to retire pretty early from the race yesterday. But these Nissans have been performing so well. Yeah,
I mean, the Nissan project it's not a new one, as we see Moffat getting a bit loose out there in the wetter part of the track. The Nissan project's been announced over, about this time last year they announced they were going to enter V8 Supercars, so the Cali team's had a while to adjust and build the new cars. We've got Scott Pye have a big slide on the exit there, make a bit of contact with Moff. I don't reckon this is done yet. Side by side into the penultimate corner, and Moff's got a little bit of track advantage now, and Jamie Wink up the inside of Scott Pye. 3 to 1.
Oh, that doesn't work.
That was never going to work.
Moffat goes round, Pye straightens him up. There's damage on all 3 cars, but they continue to drive on. Properly raining now too, by the way, as we start the final lap. Van Gisbergen leading this one by a massive margin, but the action is in the bottom half of the top 15. 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th and 15th place, all dicing. Russell Ingall in there. Look at the rain. Headlights ablaze for some, trying to negotiate their way around 5.3 Ks and 16 turns of this brilliant Albert Park Street circuit. Everyone in the Formula 1 garage is opposite us, watching to find out what it's going to do for qualifying, which we will have live for you not too far away in our broadcast. But they've got to survive this last lap of the V8s before we even think about F1 cars.
Yeah, you're right. And it is actually raining very hard there now, so the tyres have been gone through a phase where the start of the race was quite wet. It dried off. They've taken the corners off the blocks of the wet weather tyre. So we watched Shane. That's a big slide there for the last part of this race. And as I said, those tyres have got quite warm. Now he's just having fun. But those tyres are quite warm. It's raining now. They wouldn't have had the grip they had at the start of the race. And lucky that's only two-thirds of a lap left here for Shane Van Gisbergen, because you wouldn't want to do too many more. But I think he's just enjoying being out there at the moment.
And this is a real-time look at the gap, first to second. We're waiting for Craig Lowndes. There he is, the multiple champion, the legend of the sport, 12 seconds down the road. And Van Gisbergen this year said all he wanted to do was have fun. He's drifting in New Zealand. He's racing in the New Zealand V8 series as well. He's moved to Techno Autosport, and it has been such a complete performance in this wet weather race. There's the sideways slide from the flying Kiwi. Unbelievable car control, and Shane Van Gisbergen has absolutely smashed them in race 3 of the V8s. In really challenging conditions, the Giz is back on top.
And look at Craig Lowndes having a bit of fun. It's great to see the competitors happy when they've done well, and that's what the sport needs. It's fantastic to have that out there, and a great job from Jonathan Webb. That's a fantastic effort from their team. First and third, flashing the lights. He's ecstatic. Look a bit further down the pack. We've got Jason Bright, James Courtney, Will Davison. This battle's not over. Looks like James Courtney will get away with it, and Will Davison behind. That's the battle for 7th and 8th.
And we'll tell you just in a minute who'll start race 4 tomorrow from pole, because that's based on the point score from the first 3 races. It should be Fabian Coulthard, who finished 4th. This battle's not finished yet. Bit of a luft up out the final corner. Scotty Pye working on the back of the Nissan. And they're going to run to the line, bottom half of the top 15. It's so intense all the way up and down the V8 Supercar field. It's teaming down at Albert Park, but Shane Van Gisbergen is the king of the wet in Melbourne. He wins by 12.6 seconds over Craig Lowndes, with Jonathan Webb in 3rd, Fabian Coulthard 4th, and a solid drive by Davey Reynolds into P5.
Yeah, first of the forwards, a great job for David Reynolds. Jason Bright in 6th. He will start off the front row of the grid tomorrow for the final one. And we've got James Courtney, Will Davison, Michael Caruso, and Todd Kelly rounding out the top 10 in the brand new Nissan Altima.
Rick Kelly was 11th in another of the Nissans. Frosty to 12th, and Jamie Whincup 13th. Dean Fiore 14th, and Russell Engel P15.
Great job from Russ in his last year of full-time driving. Alex Davison 16th, James Moffat 17th, Scotty Pye 18th, Tim Blanchard in 19th, and David Wall rounding out the top 20.
A wild race, a wild day at Albert Park as we continue our countdown to Albert Park. Well, we've got another great opportunity from our